Hello and welcome to Conversations with Disability Rights North Carolina. I'm Tori Ekstrand. I'm an associate professor in the UNC Hussman School of Journalism and Media. And I'm really happy today to be joined by Ginny Fogg, who is Supervising Attorney of the DRNC Education Team. Ginny and her colleagues help to resolve special education and discipline issues to help ensure positive outcomes for children and families around the state. And obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed a lot about disability advocacy. It's changed a lot about education in the state. And today we're going to focus on how parents, teachers, and schools across the state have been affected and learn a little bit more about the work Ginny and her colleagues are currently doing to help out. So Ginny, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about the work you and your colleagues do for DRNC with children with disabilities in schools around the state? Yeah, let's just start there and tell us a little bit about that first.
Sure. Well, my team represents students in pre-K through 12th grades, and we generally bring claims under the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the federal law that provides the framework for the supports and services that students with disabilities in public schools are entitled to receive. And the goal of the federal law is for students with disabilities to be able to make progress and to access the general curriculum so that they can, when they leave school, be gainfully employed and live independently and have the ability to make choices and to pursue their interests and goals, just like students without disabilities. And a lot of our work involves trying to keep students with disabilities actually in the school building. A lot of our clients, because there are things about school that are not naturally suited to their needs, sometimes have challenging behaviors, and that causes them to be harder to serve, and school districts will sometimes decide that they need to be disciplined in a way that actually keeps them from receiving their education at school. And when that happens, their education is naturally very slowed down and sometimes completely stopped when they're at home or long-term suspended or put in an alternative school.
So the pandemic has obviously placed lots of additional pressures on these issues. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing, what you and your team are seeing happening now that a lot of these students, well, all of these students really are home, right?
Right. So now that school buildings are closed, it's a time when the natural channels of communication have been closed off too. So students aren't going back and forth every day and getting the information that they would normally get sent home in their backpacks, and there's not the usual emails going out and student conferences and IEP meetings that would normally be happening during this time. So I think a lot of parents probably aren't clear on what their child is supposed to be receiving in terms of regular education services and in particular special education services during this time. And so what we're seeing is really a patchwork across the state, and it differs from school district to school district and school to school and classroom to classroom. A lot right now depends on the individual teacher, the lead teacher in the classroom, and the support staff.
Can you talk about what the biggest concerns are you have with, or maybe some of the calls or discussions you've been having that concern you most about some of these children at the moment?
Sure. Well, we've received some calls from parents, and we have reached out to our existing clients to check in to see what services our clients are receiving. And some of the most alarming messages we've gotten are that some parents have not heard from the school at all. And, in the beginning, there was an extended spring break time or an early spring break or just, time for schools to figure out what the next steps were and how to put those into place. But now we're on the 7th week, really, of this school building closure, and certainly by now, all parents should have been contacted by their child's teacher, and there should be a plan in place for the special education supports and services that are in that child's IEP to be delivered to the greatest extent possible. And that might look different than it was in the school building, but there still needs to be services being provided. Unless the parent absolutely says, no, they do not want those services at this time. So that's one thing that concerns us. Another thing that is very concerning to us is some guidance that the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Exceptional Children's Division has put out that we do not feel aligns with federal law and with recent federal guidance from the Office of Special Education Programs and the Office for Civil Rights. And specifically, that guidance, which was issued on March 27th, says that if your child is in a school district that is only providing optional or supplemental instruction as opposed to mandatory instruction, then the child's FAPE rights under IDEA are not triggered. And we have expressed our disagreement, both verbally and in writing, to the Department of Public Instruction and the State Board of Education about that misalignment. And our hope is that in the near future, there will be some additional guidance that supersedes that March 27th guidance that actually does accurately state the law and will then give appropriate guidance to school districts in North Carolina about what their obligations are during this time.
What do you know about how special education teachers or do you know anything about how special education teachers are working online and how school districts are trying to administer what's in an IEP online? I mean, so much of dealing with an IEP or dealing with a student with a disability, right, is very personal. You're sitting at a desk. It's a very one-on-one, this type of instruction and assistance. Does that, and I wonder about the hesitation of some, right? Can it transfer virtually? Have you seen instances where it's working well? What do those look like, I guess I'm curious.
Right. Well, we have seen instances where it's working well. And I would say just like, we're doing right now, and lots of people who normally sit across from each other at a conference room table have moved from being in the same room together while they're collaborating. School districts can move to do that with their students, and it will work in some instances and with some students who have IEPs. It might not work for every single type of instruction or every single goal that a child has in their IEP, but I would think that it would work for a lot of them, just like it works right now for lots of other interactions. And our concern is when the school district is not even trying. The federal guidance has said, like, this is a time for flexibility and creative problem solving, and you don't know until you try. The other thing I will say is, students who are in, pre-K through 12 are very familiar with screens and in lots of different forms, and they're very comfortable with them. And a lot of students who, for instance, may have attention challenges find screens to be more comfortable for them because it provides interaction that they need to stimulate their brain to be able to pay attention. So sometimes we are actually advocating that students receive instruction through a screen or computer in the classroom, for instance, for things like maybe math, because it provides the immediate feedback and the positive reinforcement and just in general the stimulation that they need in order to make it all the way through the lesson. And so certainly that could happen now in houses that have devices and that have connectivity. And so connectivity is another issue that we are very concerned with. We know that there are large areas of our state that do not have, some areas that do not have any connectivity, and some areas that have, very unreliable connectivity. And even in some houses that may actually have a good broadband connection, there may only be one very old laptop that several children would need to access in the house for a good amount of time during the day to be able to access their education. So those are some areas that we are also working to get more information about, and we'll be doing some advocacy around.
Oh, that's great. What are you getting reports from teachers at all about how things are working, or parents? Like what kinds of calls would you say are coming into DRNC? Because we do, as an organization, get these calls, and I think, you know, obviously, yeah, doing the plan, but if they are doing the plan, are there other sort of concerns beyond that
Sure.
parents and teachers are expressing?
I would say the biggest concern that we've heard from parents at this time, other than I haven't heard from my child's school at all, and we're not getting anything, or we're getting so little that I know that my child is just losing lots of skills, particularly for those were particularly parents who have children with particularly high needs, for whom progress is can be very slow in coming, and who are very concerned about losing that progress that was really hard fought for the child and everybody supporting the child. But in a sort of probably, third in line for the concerns is the transition back to school. Because for our clients, transitioning back to school in August and after extended breaks, like during winter break or even spring break, is a real challenge. And it's challenging for all students, but particularly challenging for our clients. And I think because parents and educators and leaders don't know what that transition is going to look like. They don't know exactly when that's going to happen. We don't know what the arrangements are going to be in the school building when that happens. And because this is going to have been a really extended summer break for children, because they basically started in the middle of March, they're really concerned about their child's ability to reacclimate to the structure and the rules and the output demands, and also just the significantly increased social interaction that will occur when kids go back to school.
Yeah, one of the things I've heard reported and have talked to others about is the fact that this idea of the students losing progress, and regressing a bit with the goals that they have already attained during the year, and then they're going to move back a little. What are you advising to parents and teachers right now, in terms of what they should be doing beyond, obviously contacting their school districts if they're
Right.
not getting services, but I've heard some reports about, you should be tracking your students' progress or lack of progress, so that when you go back to school, when we have this transition, we can, as parents and advocates, report. I think, and I guess the other concern I have there, or the other thought I have there, has to do with the fact that a lot of parents are trying to work at the same time. And I think this is it's hard enough for parents of typical children. I have to think it's like 10 times as hard for parents of kids with special needs and special education needs. So I don't know, do you have any kinds of advice there, or what would you say
Sure.
when a parent talks about this?
Sure. First of all, I'll say it's, tracking progress is actually during this time might actually not be possible, but tracking services should be a little bit easier. First, it is the school district's obligation to track the services. So the teacher should be doing that. The EC, the director, case manager, coach, special education teacher, there should be some, written document created, whether that's on paper or, in a computer, about what this child is being offered every week and what they're taking advantage of. And there should also be a process of, revising what's being given or offered based on how the child is able to access it. Is it helpful? Can they do it? What supports do they need? So this is a time where, of trial and error. And then if it's possible, parents should also be tracking those services. And that may be writing something on a Post-it note, just at the end of the day of, this is what, my child did today. because that will be important when students return to school. And if that child has an IEP, then they will, in all likelihood, be entitled to compensatory education services to help make them whole for the instruction that they have lost and the progress that they have lost. And that amount, it will be helpful if the parent has a record in addition to the school's record. Is it 100% necessary? No, but if that's what we recommend if it's at all possible.
What would you say advocates for students, whether we're talking about parents or those of us who are advocates, what is it that you and your team need to know from us? Besides the calls you're getting, what can we be doing to help, or to tell you things, or to be contacting our legislators? Like, what's possible here for us to be doing in this moment?
Well, I think, having the whole community be the eyes and ears for the students who are most vulnerable during this time to losing academic and social and emotional and functional progress is really what we need. North Carolina is a big state. It has over 100 regular school districts and double that in charter schools. And so even though we have, ways for people to contact us 24/7, it's still hard for us to actually know exactly what's happening. And so if people know of situations where, students are not getting any services, haven't been contacted by the school, or maybe they have and they really don't have any way to access that education, then that's what we want to know about so that we can start to problem solve. And that's what legislators need to know about, and superintendents. I think the superintendents are working very hard to make sure that students are getting what they need, but they all have a lot of individual students in their school district too, and they can't know every situation.
Yeah. Well, Ginny, thank you so much for talking to us today, and thank you to your team for the work you're doing. This is a really challenging moment for students, parents, educators, and administrators, and I know the work that your team does is so valuable in helping these students hold on to the progress they've made so far. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to, let everybody know what's happening and, hopefully inspire some problem solving and advocacy.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks.